Hello, my amazing friends. Today, I have something truly special for you. Listen carefully, because this story will change the way you think, speak, and feel about English. He is the finest psychologist the world has ever produced. He understood the human heart like no one else. You must have heard about Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello. These are not just stories, they are mirrors of life, love, power, betrayal, ambition, everything that makes us human, he captured in his words. His influence is so great that English itself would not be the same without him. Many words, phrases, and ideas we use today came from his brilliant mind. But how did he become William Shakespeare, the greatest writer in history? He was not born into a rich or powerful family. He did not go to a grand university, yet he became the most famous name in literature. So if you are learning English today, if you struggle with words, if you wonder how to express yourself, this story is for you. Because Shakespeare himself started as an ordinary boy, just like anyone else. This is a story of struggle, passion, and unstoppable creativity. So sit back, listen carefully, and enjoy. This will not only improve your English listening skills, but also fill you with inspiration. It was a cold April day in the year 1564. In a small English town called Stratford-upon-Avon, a baby boy was born. His parents, John and Mary Shakespeare, held him close, never knowing that their son would one day change the world. His name was William Shakespeare. Stratford-upon-Avon was not a big city. It was a quiet town with narrow streets, wooden houses, and a river flowing gently through it. People lived simple lives, working as farmers, traders, and craftsmen. William's father, John Shakespeare, was a glove maker. He made fine leather gloves and sold them in the town market. He was a hard-working man, respected in the community. His mother, Mary Arden, came from a wealthy farming family. She was kind, strong, and full of love for her children. William was the third of 8 children. The house was always noisy with laughter, chatter, and the sounds of daily life. But William was different. He was curious. He observed everything. He listened to how people spoke, how they laughed, how they cried. He didn't know it yet, but this curiosity would one day make him the greatest playwright of all time. In those days, there were no televisions, no phones, no internet. People entertained themselves with stories. Traveling actors would come to town and perform plays in the streets. Young William would watch in amazement, his eyes wide with excitement. He loved listening to old legends, folk tales, and heroic stories from history. Each story made his imagination stronger. At the age of 7, William started school. The school was a small, simple building with wooden benches and a strict teacher. But what he learned there would shape his destiny. He studied Latin, history, poetry, and literature. Latin was the language of scholars, and young William became quite good at it. He read the great stories of ancient Rome and Greece. He discovered writers like Ovid, Plutarch, and Virgil. Their words stayed with him, inspiring his future plays. But William wasn't just a bookworm. He loved nature. He would walk through the green fields, watch the river, and listen to the sounds of birds. He played with his friends, ran through the streets, and enjoyed life like any other boy. Yet there was something inside him, a deep hunger for words, stories, and meaning. Just when life seemed normal, trouble struck. William's father, once a respected businessman, started facing financial problems. He had borrowed money for his business, but things were not going well. This meant the family had less money. It was a difficult time. There were even days when they struggled to buy food. William saw the stress in his father's eyes, the worry in his mother's voice. He knew that life was uncertain. But instead of feeling hopeless, he observed everything. He felt every emotion deeply. He learned that life is full of ups and downs, something he would later write about in his plays. Even as a child, William had a special way with words. He would make up little poems and rhymes. He loved to act, to play roles, to entertain his friends with stories. But no one in Stratford-upon-Avon knew that this young boy would one day write the most famous plays in the world. For now he was just William, the boy with big dreams. But those dreams were about to take him far, very far. William Shakespeare was growing up fast. By the time he turned 14, he had already read many books, listened to hundreds of stories, and watched traveling actors perform in his small town. But life was not easy. His father's financial troubles were getting worse. The once respected businessman was now struggling to pay debts. His family, which had lived in comfort, was now facing tough times. Young William saw it all. He saw how quickly life could change. He understood that nothing in life was permanent. Not money, not status, not even happiness. But instead of feeling hopeless, he became more observant, thoughtful, and creative. And then something happened that changed his life forever. By the time William turned 18, he was no longer a boy. He was a young man, and like many young men, he fell in love. Her name was Anne Hathaway. She was a beautiful, intelligent, and independent woman. But there was something unusual about their love story. Anne was 26 years old, 8 years older than William. In those times, it was uncommon for a younger man to marry an older woman. But love doesn't follow rules, and William was deeply in love with Anne. However, something unexpected happened. Anne Hathaway became pregnant before they were married. This was a big deal in those days. Society was very strict about such matters, and a child born outside of marriage would bring shame to both families. So William and Anne had to get married quickly. In November 1582, at just 18 years old, William Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. He was still a young man trying to find his way in life, and now he was about to become a father. 6 months after the wedding, Anne gave birth to their first child, a baby girl named Susanna. 2 years later, in 1585, Anne gave birth to twins, a boy Hamnet and a girl Judith. At just 21 years old, William Shakespeare was a husband and a father of 3 children. Life was moving fast, but there was one problem. How would he support his family? His father's business was still struggling, and William had no stable job. He knew he had to find a way to make money, but what could he do? He had no interest in working as a glove maker like his father. He had no land, no title, no fortune, but he had words. He had stories. He had a burning desire to create. The mysterious lost years, 1585, 1592. This was the period of Shakespeare's life that historians call the lost years, because no one knows exactly what he did during these 7 years. There are no records of him working in Stratford, and no one knows for sure how he survived. But there are some theories. Some say he became a school teacher. Since he was well educated, he might have worked as a private tutor for a rich family. Some believe he worked as an actor. He might have joined a traveling theater company, learning the art of performance. Others say he got into legal trouble and had to leave Stratford. One story suggests that he was caught hunting illegally on a rich man's land and had to run away. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. By the time Shakespeare reappeared in history in 1592, he was no longer just a small-town boy. He was in London, ready to take on the world. London, in the late 1500s, was a city full of energy, ambition, and opportunity. It was the heart of England's theater scene, filled with actors, writers, and poets, all competing to make a name for themselves. Shakespeare arrived in London with no money, no connections, and no experience. But he had something more powerful: talent, determination, and an unstoppable passion for storytelling. He began working as an actor in small theater groups. He studied everything: the way people spoke, how they moved, how they expressed emotions. Soon he started writing his own plays. At first, he wrote simple, entertaining plays to make people laugh. But as time passed, he realized he could do more. He could write plays that made people think, feel, and question life itself. By 1592, Shakespeare was becoming well known in London's theater world. But not everyone liked him. A famous playwright named Robert Greene insulted him in a letter, calling him an upstart crow, meaning a nobody who was trying to act like a great writer. But Shakespeare didn't let it stop him. Instead, he worked harder. He wrote more plays, performed in more theaters, and gained the respect of actors and audiences. Then, in 1593, something terrible happened. A deadly disease called the plague spread across London. Theaters were forced to close, and Shakespeare suddenly found himself without work. But he didn't give up. Instead of writing plays, he started writing poems. He wrote 2 famous long poems, Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece. These poems made him rich and famous. Even the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth I, was impressed by his work. By 1594, theaters reopened, and Shakespeare returned to doing what he loved most: writing and performing plays. From 1594 onwards, Shakespeare became part of a famous acting company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. He was not just writing plays, he was performing in them. His plays were full of love and heartbreak, Romeo and Juliet, power and ambition, Macbeth, betrayal and revenge, Hamlet, jealousy and madness, Othello. By the late 1590s, Shakespeare was one of the most famous playwrights in England. But Shakespeare didn't stop. He wanted more success, more influence, and more masterpieces that would stand the test of time. And that's exactly what he achieved. The Globe Theatre, a home for Shakespeare's dreams. In 1599, something extraordinary happened. Shakespeare and his acting company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, decided to build their own theater. They named it the Globe Theatre. Imagine the scene. A massive circular theater with an open roof. Thousands of excited people rushing to get a seat. The stage set for some of the greatest plays ever written. This was Shakespeare's home, his dream, his kingdom. At the Globe, he performed his greatest works. Hamlet, a story about revenge, madness, and fate. Macbeth, a tale of power, ambition, and guilt. Othello, a tragic story of love and jealousy. Julius Caesar, a political drama full of betrayal. These plays were not just entertainment. They were powerful stories that made people think, feel, and question life itself. And soon, Shakespeare's success brought him wealth beyond imagination. By the early 1600s, Shakespeare was not just a famous writer. He was one of the richest playwrights in England. He owned shares in the Globe Theatre, which brought him a huge income every time a play was performed. He earned money from published plays and poems, which were sold all over England. He received royal support, which meant the king and queen admired his work. He bought multiple properties, including a grand house in Stratford called New Place. At a time when most playwrights struggled to survive, Shakespeare was living a comfortable, wealthy life. But fame and fortune were not enough for him. He wanted something bigger. In 1603, a historic event changed everything. Queen Elizabeth I, who had supported Shakespeare, died. Her successor was King James I. At first, no one knew if the new king would appreciate theater or if he would close the theaters forever. But Shakespeare didn't have to worry. King James loved his work. In fact, he loved Shakespeare's plays so much that he personally invited Shakespeare's acting company to perform for him. And then, something incredible happened. King James gave Shakespeare's company a royal title. They were now called the King's Men. This was the highest honor a playwright could receive. It meant they were official actors of the royal court. They were protected and supported by the king himself. Shakespeare had gone from being a glovemaker's son to the most celebrated playwright in England's history. Between 1603 and 1611, Shakespeare wrote some of his most famous and deepest plays. These were not just stories. The Tempest was a magical story of forgiveness and new beginnings. His writing became darker, more emotional, and deeply philosophical because Shakespeare was changing. He was growing older. He had seen fame, fortune, betrayal, and loss. His plays became more personal, and his characters felt more real than ever before. By 1611, Shakespeare had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of. He was famous, he was rich, and he was respected by kings and nobles. William Shakespeare had lived a life beyond imagination. In 1613, Shakespeare made a decision that surprised everyone. He retired. For years, he had lived in London, writing, acting, and directing plays. But deep inside, he missed home. He missed the quiet streets of Stratford. He missed the green fields and rivers. And most of all, he missed his family. So he packed his things and returned to New Place, his grand house in Stratford. Here, he planned to spend the rest of his life in peace. He would wake up early in the morning and walk around his gardens, enjoying the beauty of nature. He would sit by the fireplace reading books and thinking about the life he had lived. He would spend time with his daughters, Susanna and Judith, talking about life, love, and the future. Sometimes visitors from London would come to see him, asking for his advice on plays and poetry. People say that even in his final years he would sit for hours, lost in his thoughts, whispering words of poetry to himself. In 1616, something unexpected happened. One day, Shakespeare attended a dinner party with his friends. It was a joyful evening. Laughter, wine, and conversation filled the room. But soon after, Shakespeare fell ill. Some say it was a fever. Some say it was a disease caught from the cold weather. No one knows for sure. But within days, his health declined rapidly. On April 23, 1616, at the age of 52, William Shakespeare breathed his last breath. The world had lost a genius, but his words would never die. Before his death, Shakespeare wrote a few lines that would be his final words to the world. He knew that after his death, people might move his body from his grave. So he wrote an epitaph, a short poem warning anyone who tried to disturb his rest. Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. Even in death his words were powerful and eternal. Shakespeare's body may have been buried, but his words refused to die. His plays continued to be performed. His books continued to be read. His name continued to be spoken. Over 400 years later, Shakespeare is still everywhere. His works are studied, performed, and loved across the world. His life is proof that words have power. Power to inspire, power to heal, power to change the world. If Shakespeare were alive today, he would have one message for you. Dream big, tell your story, and never stop believing in yourself. Because he was just a small-town boy from Stratford who dared to dream beyond the ordinary. And today, his name is written in history forever. And maybe, just maybe, you are the next great storyteller the world is waiting for. Stay inspired, stay unstoppable,